Take it away, Lonnie.
Thank you, Rebecca, and I really appreciate the invite here. I think we're starting off as a great example of some of the new kind of thinking we have to do about economics. Some of those ideas are quite old. This library is a commons, really, and we're used to doing everything through the market. But we have a community commons here in the library, and nobody thinks it's communistic or anything. It's just something. It's just a way in which we get our needs met through something that's not a market. So my name is Lonnie Gamble, and again, I just appreciate so much the work Rebecca does here. This is, for a town its size, the finest library in the country, I think, with everything that we have. I've never seen anything better. And so I just really appreciate everything that you do and all the services you offer, and thank you. I'm a professor at Maharishi University of Management in the Sustainable Living Department. This is our flagship Sustainable Living Center, produces 20% more energy than it uses, collects in its own water supply from rainwater that we drink, and actually people come from all over town to fill up their jugs because they feel it's the best water in town. It's built of local natural materials like earth blocks, and it's, I think, an example of this kind of new economic thinking where everything is interconnected, where we're relying on these very abundant flows of natural energy, solar and wind. And so, this was last weekend. Everybody remembers this. And spring is coming. And I had my first taste of greens over the weekend, even though we had the cold weather. So I'm calling this talk "Economics as if Sustainability Mattered," and it's a talk I developed with two of my colleagues at Schumacher College, where I just got back from doing a postgraduate program called Economics for Transition. And this is a conventional, if you opened up an economics textbook, most economics textbooks that have been written since the turn of the century, and economic theory, really, the reason why I say economics as if sustainability mattered, because a lot of the economic theory comes out of work that was done several hundred years ago by Adam Smith and John Stuart Mill and Malthus and a bunch of other people. And they came up with these ideas that are still very useful, but then also we have new ideas. So this is the kind of textbook version of what you would see an economy looking like. If you look here, it shows, for example, goods and services going from factories to households, households buying stuff, giving money back to firms, households providing their labor and investment capital and other factors of production to the firms paying out wages, rent, and dividends. And this is, this is kind of the model, circular flow it's called, that has been used in economics textbooks for at least 100 years. So here's some other ways of thinking about this. We've got this circular economy here still with households and firms, but then we also have pollution and waste. We have matter and energy coming in. We have pollution and waste coming out at the business and also at the consumer end. We have banks, right? We have government. We have foreign trade. We have labor and capital. We have wages and profits. We have unpaid work over here, and we have the collaborative commons. Anybody ever use the internet? The software that the internet runs on is not owned by a company. It was developed by a group of altruistic computer programmers that continue to develop and donate their time to things like Apache and things like that. So we have, the Wikipedia, this library here, all great examples of that. All those are missing from that picture of the economy. And in the end, we have solar energy coming into the system. That's really the only input we have on the Earth that comes from someplace else. And all the solar energy that comes into the Earth eventually leaves back into outer space, or else the Earth would heat up. So we have a flow, but there's a problem with this, in that we get very high quality energy from the sun that can do lots of work, and then as it flows through here, as energy changes form, it changes form in one particular direction, it becomes less useful. And so part of what we have to do with the economy is we have to dedicate energy to regenerate and renew the lost usefulness that happens as we inevitably go through. I'll give you an example of that. If I put a cup of coffee on this table, what's going to happen to it? Hot cup of coffee. Going to get cold. If you have a leak in your tire, the air leaks out, but it never leaks back in, right? So there's a tendency in nature for things to go from being concentrated to being dispersed. And to be useful, we have to concentrate them back again. And that's what life does with solar energy. And so that's a big purpose in the economy, is that we have to kind of continually give back to overcome those effects of what's called entropy. So here's another way I like to look at it. I like to look at the economy as being a subset of society. So the economy is wholly created by people. We tend to think it's something that's given to us by the gods or something like that, or that comes from someplace else that we can't change it. But we created it. We created it. We can create a new one. And then society is completely and fundamentally enclosed by the earth and by the living earth that we're all part of. And so the economy then has to obey the laws of society, and society has to obey the laws of physics and chemistry of the planet that we live on. And so this is what's left. This is a lot of what's left off conventional economics. Is it abstracts away. They say, well, we can just be clever enough, and no matter what we run out of or use up, we'll just find something else, and that the planet doesn't really matter. And new ways of thinking about economics says, yeah, that does matter. We need to take that into account. And then the economy, rather than just being, somebody mentioned this, rather than just being this kind of, one-dimensional market, also maybe includes the household, the state, and the commons as elements of how we get our needs met. This is a diagram by an economist that's getting a lot of attention now named Kate Raworth. And she has a concept she calls donut economics. And it's not about eating donuts, it's about the shape of this graph. And so there's a bunch of clever earth scientists in Europe that came up with this idea that there are maybe a dozen planetary boundaries that we need to consider. Like, for example, climate change is one, ozone layer depletion, ocean acidification, fresh water withdrawals, biodiversity loss. And so there are boundaries in which the economy has to operate. So we have to stay within what's called the safe zone. And there are many places. So this is what this outer ring is here is each piece of this pie represents a planetary geochemical physical boundary. And so in order to have a safe Earth, we need to stay within those boundaries. But on the other side of that, on the inside of that, we have social equity. So we have things like, do people have a political voice? Do we have gender equity? Are people housed? And so what this in here represents is a lack. So out here we're sort of overstepping our boundaries, and in here many people in the world don't have enough. So the idea with this new thinking about economics is that we have to operate within, the economy has to operate within this donut shape where it's just and people have what they need, but it's also safe. So this donut represents kind of the safe and just space for humanity's economy to operate. Does that make sense? So we have, kind of basic human needs in the middle that, and again, many billions of people in the world, for example, don't have what we would call a toilet. And so this is when we put the economy this way, this is our challenges, is to live within the biogeophysical limits of the planet, and then expand and grow so that we can include everybody within the. I'm an engineer, and I come from an engineering perspective, and I'm now working in the social sciences and economics. And economics and social sciences are quite different in that people have, many very reasonably held different opinions about things, and it's sort of hard to find out what is the truth. There are many different truths. And so there are many different people who hold different perspectives on where we might go. So we've come up this, in historical time, we've come up this graph. This is energy, resource, population, pollution, all these different things that are have been going up in time. And we're at this point, and where are we going to go? Are we going to go off into the techno-utopian future? Did anybody see Elon Musk's car driving off into outer space? That was pretty cool. And then are we going to maybe stabilize in this techno-stability where we pretty much keep the world the way it is now, but we power it with solar panels and wind generators? I am flabbergasted with how fast the transition to renewable energy has come in. Do you know that Iowa's probably about 48% wind powered for electricity right now? Other people say, actually, maybe where we are now is not an optimum place. Maybe we could work less, have less industrial work, maybe have a few less things, maybe better things, use a lot less energy, but have a much more rich life. So this is this kind of energy descent idea. Oh, and then the last one is the Mad Max collapse. Like, we're not going to get there. Things are going to fall apart, and we're all going to be like cooking rats over a trash can. You've all seen those dystopian future movies. That's what most of our visions of the future are. Here's Kate Raworth's 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist. The idea in the current economy is that economic growth will pretty much take care of pollution problems. Maybe they get worse for a while, but then they get better if we get richer. And they'll take care of equity problems. They'll get inequitable for a while, but it'll get better as we get richer. And so GDP has been kind of and our economy is set up so that there's a lot of pain and suffering if we don't have continued growth. And so what we're advocating here is not a failed growth economy, but an economy of a very different nature that respects these limits. So going to the donut, this neoliberal narrative, which is this, no, we won't get into that right now. Rational economic man, this is this idea that we make, that really we're all about maximizing our own individual personal consumption, and we make these rational economic decisions to do that. That's what economic theory is based on now. In the future, socially adaptable humans, that we have this capacity to love and be loved. A mechanical equilibrium, the diagrams in conventional economics are all related to mechanical systems like pumps and levers and things like that. You hear this in the news. But in the future, it's dynamic complexity. Somebody brought this up. This idea that growth will even it up to it'll be distributed by design. Growth will clean it up again. We'll design it in such a way that we don't need to clean it up, and rather growth addicted, growth agnostic. In other words, we might need growth in some areas to bring people up, but then we might have to back off in other areas so that they'll, like in a mature forest, there's always things that are coming up and things that are decaying. And so there may be growth in some areas, but overall, a circular flow that is fixed of energy and materials. Quote from Buckminster Fuller, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So that's what I think that's part of this question is can we tweak the world as it is now and create something better, or do we have to create something that's quite different?
Too much and for too long, we seem to have surrendered personal excellence and community values in the mere accumulation of material things. Our gross national product now is over $800 billion a year. But that gross national product, if we judge the United States of America by that gross national product counts air pollution and cigarette advertising and ambulances to clear our highways of carnage. It counts special locks for our doors and the jails for the people who break them. It counts the destruction of the redwoods and the loss of our natural wonder in chaotic sprawl. It counts napalm, and it counts nuclear warheads and armored cars for the police to fight the riots in our cities. It counts Whitman's rifle and Speck's knife and the television programs which glorify violence in order to sell toys to our children. Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry, or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. And it can tell us everything about America, except why we are proud that we are Americans.
What I tell my students at the university is everything we do as humans needs to be rethought in terms of sustainability and well-being of humans and also of our relationship with the living earth. And so there's sort of an infinite amount of work that needs to be done. And that's the great way to look about it. I think it's full employment for the next 50 to 100 years for everybody on the planet. And I think just like in the economy we're in now, everybody's engaged in it whether they really know it or not or want to be. I think in the economy of the future, everybody will be engaged in this regeneration process whether they know it or not. So I'm gonna close here with a little hope, I think. Can we do this? What is the level of response needed? Well, if we looked at what happened in World War II, we got serious about this. This is a poster that the government put out. You can see this poster? When you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. You know, join a car sharing club today. You know, could you imagine this would be, you know, you couldn't imagine a radical environmental organization putting out a poster like this. This is what the government put out, right? And then 4 days after Pearl Harbor, the president got on the radio and said, excuse me, all the cars you got are the cars you're going to have because we're not going to make cars anymore. We're going to turn that over to this effort of defeating fascism, and we're going to make planes, we're going to make tanks. And they started that in 4 days. They rationed fuel to 4 gallons per week, dropped to 2 gallons in 1944, 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, break it, lose your fuel in tire rations, backed by the marketing campaign. They went from military spending of 1.9% to 32% in 3 years, and the GDP increased by 75%. A lot of economic growth around destruction. Can we have that same economic growth around regeneration? Campaigns to reduce meat consumption for recycling and gardening. Dramatic increases in the level of taxation at the time. And in England, they made a transition to feeding themselves from backyard gardens in 1 year because all the industrial food production went to the war. Let's see. And then this is a picture from 1900. Spot the automobile. Can you guys see it? It's marked in red, right? So 1900. All the rest of them are horses. Okay, this is 10 years later. Find the horse. All right? So thank you. Thank you, everyone. And again, you know, let's support Rebecca and everything she does at the library. Thank you.